So this is an attempt at asking the question or answering the question, why? In case you're new here, basically what has happened in my life is I quit my job, I terminated my lease, and I left the West. And I asked myself, what is the most important and meaningful quest I could venture forth upon? And basically, it starts from the premise that the world is going to shit, but also from the, to me at least, highly crucial insight that Jiddu Krishnamurti encapsulates in his quote when he says, and this is one of my favorite quotes, when he says, the crisis is a crisis in consciousness, which is to me just so fucking deep, because to within a reality of conscious beings, everything that we have access to is inside our own minds, and that means that it all starts and ends with consciousness. And when you look at how the world is going to shit, it's very easy to misconstrue it as if all the problems are in the world. Like, you might look at the climate crisis, if there is such a thing, and think it's all about that the problem is all about too much CO2 in the atmosphere. And I mean, who could fault you? That's kind of a rational, straightforward assumption to make. But if you look deeper, the crisis is a crisis in consciousness, right? The problem, the deeper problem is really in the minds of all the 8 billion people, and maybe especially of the powerful people, of course, who can come together and just agree to reduce the amount of greenhouse gases that we release into the atmosphere. And it's really like, it doesn't really matter what you're looking at. If you're looking at like the rising polarization between the genders, between races, between rich and poor, between political camps, between like social economic groups or national or cultural fault lines, it's all a crisis in consciousness. If you look at the mental health crisis, perhaps in this particular example, it's more obvious that it's a crisis in consciousness. But also if you look at the meaning crisis, or what has been called by people like Daniel Schmachtenberger, the meta crisis, this new alienation, this addiction to screens and to rage and rage bait, and this stuckness inside echo chambers, and it's all a crisis in consciousness. And once you start looking at the world like that, it really changes, or at least for me, it has changed how I relate to these crises, or the meta crisis, because it's really in our minds, despite seemingly being problems of the world or of the external world or the external reality, if there is such a thing. And the reason it's important to realize this, I think, is because it makes you see that what we're suffering from is really a collective, broad, species-wide collective lack of self-insight, lack of cognitive, mental, spiritual depth. We're suffering from the failed maintenance of the self. And once you see that, it becomes more obvious how to maybe begin to solve the problem. What we need is a cartography of the soul. because we're lost, but we also possess the wisdom and the insight. We just need to make it available and readily available to ourselves. Because the small sins of the individual coagulate into the larger and broader sins of states and nations. And the reason why this is interesting is really that it shows that the spiritual growth of the individual is not about, it's not about our own liberation. It's really about the liberation of the species itself. And maybe if we can liberate ourselves with us, we can liberate all the other cognitive or all the other conscious entities that are suffering because of our lack of this self-insight and this depth. And this is really the reason why I think the accumulation of a library of the deepest and most important insights of the human experiment is really the most worthwhile thing I can imagine doing at this point in time.